You're wrong. The quiet correction froze an entire boardroom. The words themselves were calm, almost apologetic, yet they carried enough weight to silence 23 executives in an instant. Pens stopped moving. Coffee cups hovered halfway to waiting lips. Every pair of eyes shifted toward the woman, seated halfway down the polished conference table. Claire Monroe didn't appear to notice the panic she had just created. She simply adjusted her glasses, glanced once more at the financial projection displayed across the enormous screen, and repeated herself. "I'm sorry, Mr. DeMarco, but the acquisition model contains a calculation error." No one breathed. Across the table sat Adrian DeMarco. His reputation reached far beyond finance. Business competitors feared negotiating against him. Corporate lawyers dreaded facing him. Investors trusted his judgment almost blindly. Within the DeMarco Group, one unspoken rule existed above every written company policy. Never tell Adrian DeMarco he is wrong. Not in public. Not in private. Not ever. The directors exchanged nervous glances. Several silently wondered whether human resources would need to escort the new accountant from the building before lunch. Claire, however, remained perfectly composed. She wasn't trying to challenge authority. She genuinely believed numbers deserved honesty. Nothing more. She stood, walked toward the presentation screen, and requested the wireless controller. No one moved. Finally, Adrian himself handed it to her without saying a word. She typed 3 numbers, deleted 1 decimal, adjusted a depreciation schedule, then stepped aside. There. The updated projection appeared instantly. Projected acquisition cost, $18 million lower. The room stared. One executive quickly opened his laptop calculator. Another reviewed the spreadsheet line by line. A third quietly whispered an amount under his breath before looking visibly pale. Claire had found an accounting assumption duplicated across 2 subsidiaries, a mistake so small it hid comfortably inside hundreds of pages. A mistake worth $18 million. Silence stretched across the room. Everyone waited for Adrian's response. Instead of speaking immediately, he studied the revised figures. Then he looked toward Claire. Not with anger, with curiosity. Finally, the corners of his mouth lifted, barely enough to qualify as a smile. "Continue." Several executives nearly dropped their pens. That single word became company gossip before the meeting even ended. Claire Monroe had joined the DeMarco Group only 9 days earlier. Officially, she had been recruited as a forensic accountant to strengthen compliance across the corporation's expanding network of banks, logistics companies, hotels, and investment firms. Unofficially, many employees believed she had accepted an impossible assignment. No outsider remained comfortable inside Adrian DeMarco's organization for very long. The expectations were relentless, the standards even higher. Yet Claire approached her first week with remarkable simplicity. If paperwork balanced, she approved it. If numbers failed to balance, she fixed them. If someone disliked her conclusions, that wasn't mathematics, that was emotion, and emotions rarely impressed accountants. By Wednesday morning, she had already returned 6 incomplete reports. By Thursday afternoon, she rejected 2 departmental budgets because the assumptions relied on optimism rather than evidence. By Friday, nearly every finance manager knew her name. Not because she sought attention, because every correction created another wave of nervous whispers. Does she know who she's talking to? Someone should warn her. She'll never survive probation. Claire heard none of it. She wore headphones while reviewing spreadsheets. She preferred herbal tea to office gossip. Lunch usually consisted of whatever sandwich happened to be closest to the accounting floor refrigerator. The growing reputation surrounding her seemed almost invisible. Unfortunately for everyone else, Adrian noticed, the following Monday introduced another confrontation, this time inside the Executive Budgeting Committee. Adrian outlined an aggressive expansion strategy involving 3 regional logistics hubs. The proposal impressed nearly everyone. Heads nodded around the table almost automatically, until one voice interrupted. "The timeline is unrealistic." Every executive closed their eyes for a brief second. Claire wasn't criticizing the strategy, only the schedule. She calmly opened another spreadsheet. The construction estimates assume perfect weather. She clicked again. The labor availability assumes 0 contractor delays. Another click. And these transportation costs ignore seasonal fuel fluctuations. She looked directly toward Adrian. "You'll still make money." She paused. "Just 6 months later than you've predicted." Silence. Again. One director quietly prepared himself for disaster. Instead, Adrian leaned back, studied her projections, asked 3 questions, lost all 3. The revised schedule became official before the meeting ended. No one mentioned the original timeline again, but everyone noticed something unusual. Adrian argued fiercely. Claire answered calmly. Neither raised their voice. Neither became offended. One simply cared about winning. The other cared about being accurate. Accuracy won. Again. Within 2 weeks, an entirely new game developed inside headquarters. Employees began making private bets, not involving money, only coffee. "How long until Miss Monroe corrects today's executive meeting?" 7 minutes. I'll take 4. My guess is before Adrian finishes his second slide. The accounting department pretended not to participate. They participated enthusiastically. Even senior managers occasionally wandered past conference rooms simply to observe. Not because conflict entertained them, because watching someone disagree with Adrian and survive felt almost impossible. Claire remained completely unaware she had become the company's favorite spectator sport. To her, every conversation followed the same simple principle. If someone asked for her professional opinion, she gave it. Whether they liked it remained entirely their responsibility. Across the executive floor, Adrian found himself looking toward the accounting department more often than necessary, for reasons he hadn't yet bothered to explain. By the beginning of Claire Monroe's 3rd week, something extraordinary had happened inside the DeMarco Group. The finance department had become calmer. Invoices that once wandered between desks for days were processed before noon. Monthly reports arrived complete instead of mostly finished. Expense requests no longer disappeared into mysterious folders labeled pending review. Nobody understood how one accountant had reorganized an entire department so quickly. Claire insisted it wasn't complicated. "People don't make mistakes because they're incompetent," she explained one morning while rearranging stacks of reports. "They make mistakes because everyone assumes someone else checked first." The sentence spread through headquarters almost as quickly as the story about the $18 million calculation. Soon, employees found themselves double-checking everything. Not because Adrian demanded perfection, because Claire probably would. Unfortunately for Adrian, Claire's attention eventually turned toward him. She discovered an uncomfortable pattern while reviewing executive approvals. Nearly every major document carried Adrian's signature. Many had been signed after midnight. Several lacked supporting schedules. 2 contained handwritten notes instead of complete financial summaries. One afternoon, she appeared outside his office carrying a thick blue folder. His assistant looked alarmed. "Miss Monroe, the boss is preparing for a meeting. It'll only take a minute." Without waiting for permission, Claire knocked once and entered. Adrian glanced up from his desk. "You usually bring bad news." "I bring unfinished paperwork." She placed the folder directly in front of him. You signed these. I know. You shouldn't have. One eyebrow lifted. I wasn't aware my own signature required approval. It doesn't. She opened the first file. This acquisition summary is missing 3 appendices. The second. This contract references a risk analysis that isn't attached. The third. You approved revised operating expenses before anyone calculated projected maintenance costs. Adrian folded his hands calmly. I trusted my executives. Claire nodded. They're competent. Another page turned. They're also human. Silence lingered for several seconds. Finally, she slid a small yellow sticky note across the desk. Written neatly across the top were 4 words. Read before you sign. Adrian stared at it. Then at her. You're assigning homework. I'm preventing expensive mistakes. I've managed companies for 15 years, and you've probably been busy for all 15. She smiled politely. I'm simply helping. For the first time in years, someone had confiscated the Mafia boss's paperwork. The next battle arrived less than 48 hours later, at exactly 2:15 in the afternoon. Claire stepped into another executive strategy meeting carrying a tray. Not of reports, sandwiches. The discussion immediately stopped. One director whispered, "What's happening?" Claire ignored him. She placed a sandwich in front of Adrian, another beside the chief legal officer, a third beside operations, then crossed her arms. Lunch? Adrian blinked. We're discussing a merger. You've been discussing it since 11. We're almost finished. Claire looked around the room. Has anyone here eaten today? No one answered. She sighed. That explains the acquisition proposal. One executive quietly lowered his eyes. Another unsuccessfully hid a smile. Adrian remained perfectly serious. Miss Monroe. Yes? This meeting is important. So is blood sugar. We'll eat afterward. You won't? She pointed toward the untouched coffee cups. You've each consumed approximately 6 cups of caffeine. Another glance around the table. You're all negotiating while hungry. She paused. Hungry people approve terrible budgets. The room became suspiciously quiet. Nobody wanted to laugh first. Finally, Adrian asked, Is this an accounting principle? No. It's biology. Another pause. Then something almost unbelievable happened. Adrian reached for the sandwich. Without another word, everyone else did the same. The merger discussion resumed 15 minutes later. It proved noticeably shorter, and considerably more productive. The stories multiplied. Claire introduced mandatory 15-minute coffee breaks for department heads during quarterly reporting. She refused to schedule meetings beginning after 6 in the evening unless genuine emergencies existed. She even convinced information technology to install automatic reminders requiring executives to review supporting documents before submitting approvals. Employees watched the transformation with endless fascination. Every new policy seemed destined to trigger another disagreement. Every disagreement somehow ended exactly the same way. Adrian argued. Claire listened. Claire explained. Adrian reluctantly agreed. The accounting department eventually created an unofficial office tradition. Whenever Adrian appeared on their floor, someone quietly checked the clock. 8 minutes? I'll say 6. No chance. Today's topic looks serious. I still think she'll win. No money ever changed hands. Only coffee. The winner enjoyed free espresso for the day. Oddly enough, Claire never realized she was the subject of the predictions. One rainy Thursday afternoon, Adrian surprised everyone by walking directly into the finance department without his usual entourage. Conversations immediately stopped. Employees pretended to work with exaggerated concentration. Claire didn't look up from her monitor. Good afternoon. I need yesterday's compliance report. It's on your desk. I wanted another copy. You already have 3. I prefer paper. She finally looked at him. You prefer excuses. A junior accountant nearly choked on his coffee. Adrian remained expressionless. Perhaps. Claire opened a drawer, removed another copy, but instead of handing it over, she held on to it. Did you finish reading the previous version? I skimmed it. She frowned. That's not reading. I understood the important parts. She flipped directly to page 27. What does footnote 12 say? Silence. He didn't answer. Claire nodded once, exactly as though confirming a mathematical proof. I'll keep this copy until you've finished the first one. The finance department collectively forgot how to breathe. She had just denied Adrian DeMarco access to his own report. After several long seconds, he laughed. Not loudly, just enough for everyone nearby to hear. I appear to have lost again. Claire finally handed him the report. You'll lose less often if you finish your homework. He accepted the file with remarkable dignity. I'll consider that constructive criticism. It wasn't criticism. What was it? She smiled. Preventive maintenance. That evening, long after most employees had gone home, Adrian stood alone inside his office, overlooking the city skyline. His chief advisor entered quietly. You seem happier lately. Adrian continued reading the corrected compliance report. I've been corrected 12 times this week. 14. Adrian looked up. You've been counting? The entire building has. The advisor hesitated before adding with careful amusement. People used to fear your meetings. And now? Now they wonder what Miss Monroe will argue about. For a moment, Adrian said nothing. Then an almost imperceptible smile appeared. They're becoming more efficient. Because of the meetings? No. He closed the folder. Because someone finally has the courage to tell me when I'm wrong. Outside his office, the lights of the city stretched endlessly into the night. Inside the DeMarco group, a quiet revolution had begun, and not a single person realized that the most feared Mafia boss in the city had already started looking forward to losing their next argument. By the second month of Claire Monroe's employment, an unexpected problem had emerged inside the DeMarco group. The accounting department had become the busiest destination in headquarters, not because tax season had arrived, because Adrian DeMarco suddenly seemed fascinated by financial reports. No one believed it, especially not the finance team. The boss, who once requested digital summaries delivered directly to his office, now appeared in person almost every day. Sometimes he claimed he wanted to review quarterly projections. Other times he needed clarification on compliance procedures. Occasionally, he insisted the lighting in accounting was somehow better for reading. No one dared challenge the explanation. No one believed it either. On Monday morning, Adrian arrived carrying a folder barely 5 pages thick. Claire looked up from her monitor. You walked 4 floors for that? I happened to be nearby. She glanced toward the elevator. Your office is in the opposite direction. I was inspecting the building. The finance department? The entire building. She nodded thoughtfully. Convenient. What is? That every inspection somehow ends beside my desk. Several accountants suddenly became fascinated by their keyboards. One quietly removed his headphones without pretending otherwise. Claire opened Adrian's folder. This report is already correct. I know. Then why bring it? I wanted your confirmation. She handed it back immediately. Confirmed. He remained standing. She returned to her spreadsheet. After nearly 15 silent seconds, Claire looked up again. Was there something else? Adrian appeared to consider the question very carefully. No. Then why are you still here? I appreciate efficient departments. She smiled politely. You've appreciated this one every day this week. Without another word, Adrian accepted the report and walked away. The moment the elevator doors closed, the entire accounting floor erupted into suppressed laughter. It's official, whispered Ethan, one of the senior auditors. The boss has forgotten where his own office is. Claire frowned. He probably enjoys observing different departments. 20 people exchanged amused glances. No one corrected her. The visits continued. Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Each excuse became increasingly creative. I need to verify expense classifications. The legal department misplaced a document. I wanted your opinion about printer placement. Claire blinked. Printer placement? The current arrangement seems inefficient. She looked toward the printer. It's been there for 6 years. Exactly. I don't understand. You aren't supposed to. She shrugged. All right, then returned to work. Adrian remained another 8 minutes discussing office supply storage with absolutely no enthusiasm. The finance department concluded he deserved an award for determination. A week later, the annual executive performance review brought together department heads from across the company. During a break between presentations, Michael Reeves, Director of Corporate Strategy, approached Claire near the refreshment table. I've been meaning to tell you something. Claire accepted a cup of tea. All right. The logistics audit you redesigned? Yes. It saved us almost $4 million. I'm glad. Michael smiled warmly. You don't get enough credit around here. Claire looked genuinely puzzled. I receive a salary. I mean recognition. The reports are recognition. No. He laughed softly. I mean, people should know how talented you are. Claire lowered her eyes for a moment, slightly embarrassed. Thank you. It was well deserved. Neither noticed Adrian entering the room. He heard only the final sentence. People should know how talented you are. His expression remained perfectly calm, almost too calm. He approached them with measured confidence. Michael. Boss! I've just remembered something. What is it? The Nevada acquisition documents. Michael frowned. They're finished. They require another review. I reviewed them yesterday. Adrian nodded thoughtfully. And now I'd like you to review them. In Nevada. Michael blinked. The state? Yes. The office there requested assistance. Claire looked between them. I thought the Nevada office passed its audit last month. It did, Adrian answered without hesitation. They've requested preventative oversight. Michael stared at him. You created a business trip. I created an opportunity. For what? Professional development. A long silence followed. Finally, Michael sighed with the unmistakable expression of a man who understood exactly what had just happened. I'll pack tonight. Excellent. As Michael walked away, Claire looked genuinely concerned. Was that really necessary? Adrian folded his hands behind his back. The Nevada office deserves experienced leadership. She accepted the explanation immediately. That's thoughtful. Across the room, Michael nearly laughed out loud. The story spread faster than any company rumor in recent memory. By lunchtime, everyone knew. The boss had reassigned a senior executive less than 5 minutes after he complimented Claire. Human resources pretended not to notice. Legal refused to comment. Operations started a betting pool. Not about whether Adrian admired Claire. That question had already been answered. The new wager involved something else entirely. How long would it take before Claire realized? Predictions ranged from 3 weeks to never. Claire remained spectacularly oblivious. When her assistant cautiously mentioned that the boss visited unusually often, Claire offered a perfectly logical explanation. He enjoys auditing. The assistant struggled to maintain a straight face. He enjoys auditing? Some people collect stamps. Yes, Apparently, he collects financial reports. The assistant later repeated the conversation to 3 colleagues. By the end of the afternoon, half the building was laughing. Not at Claire, at the astonishing innocence that allowed a woman brilliant enough to uncover million-dollar accounting errors to completely overlook the obvious. Adrian himself seemed blissfully unaware of his own behavior. One afternoon he entered accounting, carrying absolutely nothing. Claire immediately noticed. "You forgot the report." "What report?" "The one you usually pretend to need." He hesitated. "I've already read today's. So why are you here?" He looked around the department as though searching for inspiration. "I wanted to observe workplace efficiency." Claire considered the answer, then pointed toward an empty chair beside her desk. "You'll observe more efficiently if you stop standing in the aisle." He sat for nearly 20 minutes, without speaking. Claire worked peacefully through spreadsheets, while Adrian reviewed documents he had clearly finished earlier. Finally, she broke the silence. "Can I ask something?" "Of course. Do executive offices become lonely?" He looked surprised. "What makes you ask that? You spend an unusual amount of time down here." She tilted her head thoughtfully. "I assumed perhaps it was quieter, for the first time in years." Adrian DeMarco found himself completely speechless. Across the department, 3 accountants suddenly became very interested in filing cabinets, so they wouldn't burst into laughter. After several seconds, Adrian quietly replied, "It is quieter." Claire smiled. "I thought so. If you ever need a place to work without interruptions." She gestured toward the empty desk across from hers. "You're welcome to use it." The entire accounting floor froze. The most feared Mafia boss in the city had just been offered a spare desk in accounting. Adrian glanced at the modest workstation, then back at Claire. A rare warmth softened his usually unreadable expression. "I appreciate the invitation. You'll need your own calculator. I'll remember that." That evening, as employees packed their bags, 2 veteran capos waited outside Adrian's office. One looked toward the accounting floor. "Do you think she knows?" The older capo chuckled. "Not even slightly." "And the boss?" "He probably thinks he's hiding it." They both laughed quietly. Inside his office, Adrian stood by the window overlooking the city, absent-mindedly holding a calculator Claire had loaned him earlier that afternoon. He glanced at it once, then smiled to himself. Somewhere between the endless meetings, the corrected spreadsheets, the confiscated paperwork, and the daily arguments he never seemed to win, he had stopped visiting accounting because he needed financial advice. Now, he simply liked ending his day wherever Claire Monroe happened to be. And the funniest secret in the entire DeMarco group was that everyone knew it. Everyone, except Claire. Autumn arrived with the DeMarco Foundation's annual charity gala. Unlike ordinary corporate dinners, the event gathered the city's most influential bankers, judges, investors, philanthropists, and business leaders beneath one crystal-lit ballroom. The evening was designed to celebrate success. It was also where reputations quietly rose, or disappeared. Claire had almost declined the invitation. "I'll spend the entire night explaining accounting," she had told her assistant. "You'll spend the night representing the company," her assistant corrected gently. "There's a difference." Reluctantly, Claire agreed. She wore a simple navy blue evening gown that emphasized comfort more than fashion. No extravagant jewelry, no dramatic makeup, only quiet confidence. Several employees hardly recognized her when she entered the ballroom, not because she looked like someone different, because she looked exactly like herself. Comfortable, authentic, uninterested in impressing anyone. Across the room, Adrian noticed her almost immediately. He had attended hundreds of formal events, yet for several seconds, the conversations around him seemed to disappear. Someone else noticed as well. Isabella Thornton, elegant, graceful, the daughter of one of the city's oldest banking families. For years, society columns had casually linked her name with Adrian's. Neither family confirmed the rumors, neither denied them. Isabella had long assumed time would eventually settle the matter. Then Claire Monroe appeared. She wasn't glamorous. She wasn't politically connected. She wasn't interested in elite social circles. Yet somehow, she had accomplished something Isabella never had. She made Adrian smile. Not often, not dramatically, but genuinely. That alone felt unforgivable. The evening progressed with speeches celebrating the Foundation's charitable projects. Executives received recognition one after another. Department heads accepted applause. Project directors stood for photographs. Finally, Isabella approached the stage to thank the leadership team on behalf of several partner institutions. She smiled with effortless elegance. "I'd like to recognize the extraordinary people whose leadership made this remarkable year possible." One by one, she announced names. Operations, legal, corporate strategy, investment banking, hospitality, logistics. Each executive received warm applause. Claire waited politely. She assumed accounting simply wasn't part of the presentation. Then Isabella looked directly toward her. A perfectly pleasant smile remained on her face. "Of course." She paused delicately. "We should also appreciate those who work diligently behind the scenes." Several guests shifted uneasily. "Some people," Isabella continued smoothly, "are excellent with calculators." A few uncomfortable smiles appeared around the ballroom. But leadership requires far more than numbers. Silence settled across the room. The words contained no insult anyone could openly criticize. Yet everyone understood exactly whom they targeted. Every executive from the DeMarco group slowly turned toward Claire, waiting. Would she defend herself? Challenge Isabella. Leave? Claire simply lowered her eyes, then offered a small nod, a calm one. She quietly picked up her glass of water and prepared to return to her seat. She refused to compete for dignity. Sometimes, silence carried more confidence than any argument. Around the ballroom, several guests suddenly found Isabella's remarks far less graceful than they had first appeared. Claire's refusal to retaliate made the insult seem smaller, and Isabella's intentions much larger. From across the room, Adrian had watched enough. He did not interrupt Isabella. He did not raise his voice. He did not embarrass her. Instead, he calmly walked onto the stage after the applause faded. "Before we conclude the evening," his voice remained steady, "I'd like to share something." He nodded toward the audiovisual technician. "The acquisition summary, please." The enormous screen behind him illuminated. Charts appeared. Financial timelines. Completed mergers. Corporate expansions. Investment growth. Many guests assumed they were about to hear another routine business presentation. Instead, Adrian pressed the remote. The first acquisition appeared. A small annotation highlighted one accounting adjustment. Accounting risk identified. Claire Monroe. The next slide. Another acquisition. Compliance exposure prevented. Claire Monroe. Another. Undisclosed liability detected. Claire Monroe. Again, again, again. The ballroom grew completely silent. Every major expansion completed during the previous year carried the same quiet signature. Not public speeches, not negotiations, not headlines. Careful work, patient analysis, the courage to tell powerful people uncomfortable truths. Adrian looked toward the audience. These projects generated thousands of jobs. Another slide appeared. They protected retirement funds. Another. They expanded charitable programs. He slowly lowered the presentation remote. And nearly every one of them succeeded because someone refused to let us make expensive mistakes. His gaze settled gently on Claire. You've heard my name attached to these achievements. A faint smile crossed his face. Tonight, I'd like everyone to meet the person who truly protected them. The ballroom erupted into sincere applause. Not polite applause. Grateful applause. Many executives stood. Several investors joined them. One by one, the room rose to its feet. Claire remained frozen beside her chair. She looked almost alarmed. "They're applauding the wrong person," she whispered. The chief legal officer smiled warmly. No. They finally found the right one. Adrian walked toward the head table. Without hurry. Without ceremony. He placed one hand on the chair reserved for him throughout the evening. The symbolic seat of authority. Then, he quietly pulled it away from the table. Every camera turned. Every conversation stopped. He looked toward Claire. "This chair," he said calmly, "has been occupied by the loudest voice in the room for too long." A few guests exchanged puzzled looks. He smiled. "Tonight, it belongs to the person who earned everyone's trust." He gestured toward the chair. "Claire." She stared at him. "I don't think." For once. His eyes softened with unmistakable warmth. "Don't argue with me." The ballroom burst into laughter. Even Claire couldn't suppress a smile. She slowly walked forward, while the applause continued. Instead of sitting immediately, she looked at Adrian. "I'll only borrow it." He shook his head. "You've been carrying this company for months. It's only a chair." "No," he answered quietly enough that only she could hear. "It's respect." For the first time since joining the DeMarco Group, Claire found herself completely speechless. She accepted the seat, not because it elevated her, because refusing would diminish everyone who had chosen to recognize her. The following Monday felt strangely ordinary. The accounting department still smelled faintly of fresh coffee. Printers still jammed. Someone still misplaced expense receipts. Claire quietly returned to work, as though nothing remarkable had happened. Which, in her opinion, nothing had. 3 weeks later, the board unanimously approved her promotion. Chief Financial Officer, the youngest in company history. No one objected. In truth, most wondered why it hadn't happened sooner. Power, however, changed remarkably little. Claire still corrected spreadsheets, still returned incomplete reports, still refused to approve budgets lacking evidence. She also continued confiscating Adrian's paperwork whenever he attempted to sign documents too quickly. One afternoon, she entered his office carrying another familiar blue folder. "You skipped lunch." "I'm busy." "You've said that every Tuesday. I'm preparing an investment announcement." She placed a neatly wrapped sandwich beside his keyboard. "You can prepare while chewing. I have a meeting." "So does your stomach." He sighed dramatically. "You've become impossible." "No." She smiled. "I've become consistent." He accepted the sandwich. Again. Life inside the DeMarco Group eventually settled into its own peculiar rhythm. Everyone accepted that the boss lost most arguments involving Claire. Everyone accepted that this somehow made the company stronger. Then came the arrival of a newly hired executive vice president. On his second day, he witnessed Claire interrupt Adrian during an investment briefing. "You forgot page 14. The room instantly fell silent. The new executive looked horrified. Across the table, Adrian calmly flipped through the report. Page 13. Then, nothing. He frowned, reached beneath another folder. There it was, page 14. He closed his eyes for one brief second. Without saying a word, he handed the entire report to Claire. The executives around the table immediately burst into laughter. Claire accepted the folder with quiet satisfaction. "I'll consider that today's victory." The new vice president leaned toward one of the senior capos, speaking barely above a whisper. Does the boss always let her speak to him like that? The older capo chuckled. "No, The younger man looked confused. No? He simply realized. The capo smiled knowingly. She's usually right. After the meeting, Adrian caught up with Claire outside the conference room. She handed back the corrected report. You should organize your paperwork. I know. You keep saying that. I do. She folded her arms. So why haven't you improved? He stepped a little closer. Close enough that only she could hear his answer. Because every time you prove me wrong. He looked directly into her eyes. You make my empire stronger. Claire's confident expression softened. A faint blush warmed her cheeks. She searched for a practical reply. Couldn't find one. Then Adrian added, with the same quiet sincerity that had surprised everyone at the gala. And every time you smile, you make my day easier. For perhaps the first time in her career, Claire Monroe had no correction to offer. Only a smile, a genuine one. Behind them, several executives discreetly pretended to organize documents while absolutely listening to every word. The accounting department would undoubtedly hear about this within minutes. No one minded. Some stories deserved to spread. Months later, visitors often asked what made the DeMarco Group different from every other powerful corporation in the city. The answer was never found in financial statements, nor in market share, nor in intimidating leadership. It lived in a conference room where the city's most feared mafia boss no longer needed to win every argument, because he had discovered something far more valuable than always being right. He had found someone courageous enough to challenge him, wise enough to improve him, and kind enough to do it without ever trying to make him feel small. Their relationship was never built on dramatic rescues. It wasn't forged through danger or grand declarations. It grew from shared respect, playful debates, quiet trust, and the certainty that love isn't measured by how often two people agree. Sometimes, the strongest partnership begins with the courage to say, "You're wrong," and with the wisdom to smile and answer, "Then help me get it right."